N.W.T Senego Chuk Awike Senahite or T go heaven attack what's an did I they go king he thoughts on the Zonko Cutie Galaketa or T go heaven at a tabi of labets and continue Zira Kakont ende that if the guy Marisuri that guy it's in and at N.W.T Nedze Kati with the Jesus natural dying la. Masi de Gamari or Tia Unic Awi puts an anity, Tabia, Globets and Codine, Sirakakont ende.
Thank you, colleagues. I'd like to thank Sarah Cleary for the opening guiding words. Minister statements. Minister for Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to remind members of the funding made available by the Department of Health and Social Services, supporting the delivery of community-based programs focused on mental wellness and addiction recovery. These funds were created in response to engagement with Indigenous governments, in which they asked the N.W.T to provide more flexible funding that could be used to run programs in their own communities and regions that would be responsive to the needs of the Indigenous people. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the Department of Health and Social Services in our responsiveness to these needs, and I am pleased to share the information about this available funding. Every year, $3.05 million is available through the Department of Health and Social Services Community Wellness and Addiction Recovery Fund. This fund prioritizes Indigenous governments and supports the delivery of culturally relevant, community-based options for residents living with mental health and addiction issues. Created in 2023-2024, in response to feedback from the N.W.T Council of Leaders, it is the combination of the On the Land Healing Fund, Addictions Recovery Peer Support Fund, and Addiction Recovery and Aftercare Fund. The intention of this merger was to reduce the administrative burden on Indigenous governments and to enhance flexibility when identifying the priorities and allocating resources. This funding opportunity was open to community governing authorities and other community organizations on April 1st. The second fund the department administers is the Community Suicide Prevention Fund. This fund supports communities in the development and delivery of culturally safe, community-based programs focused on suicide prevention, awareness, and stigma reduction. It is also available to support communities interested in developing or implementing their own suicide prevention strategies. The amount of this fund is $725,000 annually, and one project per community can be approved. This fund is available to a wide variety of community organizations. There is a very simple application form for these funds, and the department staff are available to support communities through the application process, answer any questions, and provide feedback about potential activities if needed. Indigenous governments are well positioned to understand the unique needs of their communities, and community-based program is a critical part of our overall mental wellness and addiction services. Mr. Speaker, funding is still available in both funding pots, and I am hopeful that communities will work with the department to take advantage of these opportunities to further enhance community supports. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Minister statements. Minister statements. Member statements. Member from Nuvik-Boot Lake.
Too many lakes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2001, Inuvik hosted the first annual Inuvik Petroleum Show. It was inspired by the impending announcement that the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline was on the horizon and Inuvik's economic future looked bright. The town was bumping, Mr. Speaker. You could barely find a parking spot downtown. The hotels were busy, the restaurants were crowded, and people were working in the exploration industry. Tour operators were busy, and artisans were selling their products. Mr. Speaker, residents were excited at the prospect of burning clean, locally sourced natural gas to heat their homes at a price that would allow them to live without having to worry about how they'll get through another winter. certainly not the $40 per gigajoule they currently must pay for gas shipped to Inuvik from southern sources. Mr. Speaker, over 700 people attended the show in its early days. Celebrities and prominent political speakers attended. Journalists such as Amanda Lang, Andrew Coyne, and the late great Rex Murphy all made appearances to speak to delegates and Indigenous leaders leading the pipeline project to see for themselves what the buzz was all about. Mr. Speaker, the President of KOGAS flew from Korea to meet with industry and Indigenous leaders to explore opportunities for our trillions of tons of clean-burning natural gas. As we know, Mr. Speaker, the regulatory system flexed its muscle, and 6 years later, the pipeline dream was no more. But good news, Mr. Speaker. The good news is that the community of Inuvik soldiered on, and the show, now called the Inuvik Expo, still exists. It had to adjust, just as our counterparts in Ottawa have adjusted its priorities around energy development. This week, Mr. Speaker, over 200 delegates are in Inuvik discussing such things as natural gas and renewable resources, climate and energy innovation, Indigenous leadership and circumpolar governance, and sovereignty and the knowledge economy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to applaud and congratulate the hard-working members of my town council, Indigenous governments, and our government for keeping this show relevant and continuing to push for all economic opportunities in our region. Mr. Speaker, like the resilient and hard-working residents of our community, I too will soldier on. I will continue to advocate for the development of this resource. I will continue to advocate for the Indigenous government who are currently developing their own natural gas facility to provide some relief to our residents. Mr. Speaker, I sometimes think I have a better chance of getting support for a unicorn farm in Inuvik than support for our natural gas. But sadly, unicorn tears will not heat the homes and provide prosperity for people living in the Beaufort Delta, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Nunavut Boot Lake. Member statements. Member from the Great Slate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I tend to keep tabs on other governments' exciting legislation and initiatives. Something that made me very happy indeed back in April was hearing that the Manitoba government put forward Bill 33. It received assent last week, Mr. Speaker. Manitoba's Bill 33 makes amendments to the Manitoba Change of Name Act and will further clarify in law that trans and non-binary folks will not be published in the Manitoba Gazette under their dead name when changing their legal name during transition. Being dead named is an extremely traumatic experience for many. I was able to seek clarification from our wonderful N.W.T. Assembly research staff that there are already allowances in our own N.W.T. change of name legislation for trans folks not to be published in our Gazette when changing a name. However, when a trans person goes online to find out how they can apply for a change of name, that option is not discussed in any way on the HSS website, nor is it captured in the change of name application form. The minister has let me know that trans and gender diverse folks seeking a name change can call the Registrar of Vital Statistics at 1-800-661-0830 toll-free to request an exemption in their application. The minister also noted that removing the requirement for publicly posting changes of name in the Gazette is something the department is considering as part of planned amendments to the Change of Name Act. As the application for a change of name form is found in associated regulations, changes to the form will require an amendment as well. Now, while this is a good start, I still have more questions around how we can make interactions with the health system more safe and inclusive for gender diverse folks. And those questions for the Minister of Health, I'll have them at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Member statements. Member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2024 graduation. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge and celebrate the accomplishments of the Statute Region's high school graduates. These young adults have reached an important milestone in their lives, completing their secondary education and preparing to embark on their further new education journeys. Mr. Speaker, education is the key to unlocking a brighter future, and these graduates have certainly demonstrated their commitment to personal growth and development. They have acquired valuable knowledge and skills that will serve them well into the future endeavors. Whether they choose to pursue higher education, enter the workforce, or explore other opportunities, education by itself provides security, deserves recognition, and needs our investment. It is vitally important for the future and stability of the Northwest Territories. Mr. Speaker, I encourage these graduates to continue learning, to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth, and to use their education to make positive contributions to their communities and to the world around them. The Statute region is proud of their achievements, and we look forward to seeing them all as they accomplish in the coming years. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to traveling to the Statute communities after our spring sitting. These graduation ceremonies await. Some have occurred, some are yet to come. And stand alongside the proud parents, leaders, grandparents, brothers and sisters, and most importantly, the education staff. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Statute region and this Assembly, I extend my heartfelt congratulations to the N.W.T graduate classes. May they continue to strive for excellence, pursue their dreams with passion, and make their mark on the world. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Thank you. Member from the Statute. Member statements. Member from Mophie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the good work done in the last Assembly by the Minister of Education, Culture and Employment, who is now the Honorable Premier. In the 19th Assembly, the Minister of ECE made changes to the Student Financial Assistance Program, where the 12th semester limit, or equivalent to $60,000 cap on funding, was removed for Indigenous students. Mr. Speaker, this is an incredible offering to the Indigenous students in the N.W.T. This support makes education more accessible and equitable. Mr. Speaker, we know the education outcomes of Indigenous people in the N.W.T are well below non-Indigenous. Non-Indigenous students graduate high school at a rate of 70 to 80%. But Indigenous students are graduating at only a rate of 40 to 50%. The graduation rate is higher in Yellowknife than anywhere else in the Northwest Territories, although graduation rates in the regional centers are close behind. Mr. Speaker, clearly students in small communities are disadvantaged and require extra services and support to achieve the equity in education. Achieve equity in education. Mr. Speaker, education is a treaty right, and providing this unlimited SFA support truly means that Indigenous students can have a dream and now have the means to achieve the knowledge which can make those dreams reality. A lot of students in small communities can now use SFA to upgrade after high school so they can get into college or university and feel comfortable and ready for post-secondary education. Without a cap or limit on the amount of funding they can access, students in small communities are set up for success. Now, Indigenous students can access SFA for the things they need to do, whether it be upgrading or pursuing the highest level of education they can dream of. Mr. Speaker, can I have unanimous consent to conclude my statement?
Thank you. Member from Mophie. Member from Mophie is asking unanimous consent to conclude her statement. Seeing no nays, you may conclude your statement.
Mr. Speaker, this government has a major task to improve education outcomes in the N.W.T, but there have been good actions taken along the way. I want to acknowledge and thank the Minister of ECE from the 19th Assembly for changes in policy to support Indigenous students, most especially those in small communities. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Mophie. Member statements. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to draw attention to the growing population experiencing homelessness in Yellowknife and the nonprofit emergency shelters whose capacity is being completely overwhelmed. The last time the City of Yellowknife did a point-in-time count in 2021, it was estimated that at least 312 people were experiencing homelessness in Yellowknife, the vast majority of whom are Indigenous, and 99 people at that time were staying regularly in emergency shelters. But the numbers have gone up a lot more since then. The stress of COVID lockdowns resulted in more violence in many homes. Since then, many more women and youth in particular have been seeking emergency shelter. This series of evacuations last summer caused most of our territory to be displaced from their home communities, and many ended up on the streets of Yellowknife. Some of those who were evacuated from Yellowknife returned from southern provinces with some new friends in tow. Recently, I met with the Salvation Army, which is within the Yellowknife North Riding. It provides an emergency men's shelter every night with 31 sleeping spaces. It also operates the Bailey House, which is a 32-bed men's transitional housing facility, including 4 private rooms reserved for those coming out of jail. Now, normally, as the weather gets warmer and sleeping rough becomes more of an option, numbers in the emergency shelter would start to dwindle. But the Salvation Army is currently at over double its capacity every single night. They are trying to pack over 60 people into cramped rooms with mats laid out on the floor. They are working with people under the influence of harder drugs who are more severely intoxicated than they've seen before. Predictably, this results in more violence amongst shelter users and against staff. Many of the longer-term shelter users are now terrified to be there in the same cramped space as a younger and tougher crowd, but they have nowhere else to go. The RCMP and the ambulance are being called multiple times each night, and this, of course, does not really solve anything. In this kind of environment, you can't even offer people basic safety, let alone counseling or medical treatment or pathways to a different life. Mr. Speaker, I'm worried our shelter system in Yellowknife will collapse if we don't urgently find better solutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Member statements. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, the start of summer means the countdown begins for the world-renowned Folk on the Rocks Music Festival, hosted every year in my beautiful Range Lake riding. Since 1980, this proud tradition has showcased the very best of the North's musical talent and has brought nationally and internationally renowned musicians to the N.W.T, delighting festival goers and giving these talented performers some northern exposure. It's now in its 44th year. The festival features talented local northern groups such as Amy and the Easy Hundo, Branded Sonnet, Refrigerator, Narwhal, Grace Clark, Tanya Snow, and the David Gaughan Band. They will also feature performances from acts such as the Aurora Fiddle Society, Glam on the Rocks, Taiga Yoga, and the Yellowknife's Dene Drummers. It's no surprise Range Lake's Folk on the Rocks has been named the best small music festival in Canada. The hard work of the Folk on the Rocks organizing team ensures an exceptional experience for attendees year after year. The combination of their dedication and the exceptional talent they attract provides more than a great time for Northerners. It also brings in tourists from all over the world as well. Folk on the Rocks also provides an amazing opportunity for volunteers, young and old, to enjoy the event while facilitating arts and culture in the North. So, if you and a friend want to come and help out this year, you're more than welcome to. The festival takes place between July 19th and the 21st, and all are invited to the Warm the Rocks free public event at the Samba Cay Civic Plaza on the afternoon of July 19th to kick things off. Tickets are for sale now at folkontherocks.com, where the final stage schedule has just been posted. They're available for purchase on location as well. Let's rock, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Member statements. Member from Trinidad-Willowdale.
Mr. Speaker, another school year draws to an end, and it's a good time to reflect on Indigenous education in the North. We all want the best education for our children, but unfortunately, like all public services, education exists in a long shadow of colonialism and systemic racism. And this means First Nation communities have a different experience with the education system, in addition to having their own unique needs. Treaty rights have enshrined the rights to education for Indigenous people, and those treaties are themselves enshrined in the Canadian Constitution. But work still needs to be done to realize those rights and to the full extent. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, the Government of Northwest Territories has recently committed to implementing the United Nations Charter of Rights of Indigenous People here in the North, which means bringing their laws into alignment with the rights outlined in that document, including the rights to the improvement of economic and social conditions, implementation of treaties, and consultation and cooperation with Indigenous people. UNDRIP has a lot to say when it comes to Indigenous education, specifically as well, including the rights to establish and control their education system and institution and access to all level and forms of education of the state without discrimination, and that particular attention should be paid to the rights and needs of our children. Mr. Speaker, we need to bring our territory education up to standards laid out in UNDRIP in accordance with the rights enshrined in the Canadian Constitution and our treaties. Because the status quo is not working, it's not getting enough Indigenous children through the high school. And children who graduate after 6 years of high school education, then the Student Financial Assistance forces Indigenous students who graduate high school to pick between supplementary grants or remissible loans. Either does not meet the needs, and the federal CERNAC money partially funds this program, so they should have access to both, and having this supplementary grant is also discriminatory. Fixing this barrier to Indigenous students and students' financial assistance is a short-term solution, but my constituents have brought to my attention, but there are many long-term solutions as well. The previous Assembly passed the UNDRIP Implementation Act, and it's time to bring legislation in line with UNDRIP and find a solution to education. UNDRIP mandates us to implement. I look forward to questioning the Minister of ECE on some of these solutions later today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Trinidad-Wellity. Member statements. Member from the Decho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know in the N.W.T. our people are struggling with mental health challenges. Just over 56% of people in the N.W.T. rate themselves as mentally well. So that's people that are thinking good about themselves. Indigenous people, and particularly former residential school students and people that went to residential school, rate themselves a little lower than that as being mentally well. Mr. Speaker, this is heartbreaking. We know in the N.W.T. we have high rates of smoking, poor diets, inactivity, and heavy drinking. And Mr. Speaker, this is and all of these stem from the mental health issues. When we are not mentally well, we become unwell physically, emotionally, and even spiritually. Mr. Speaker, we cannot separate our mind from our body. Our mind, body, and spirit are crucial to our overall well-being, and we must give our communities the tools to take care of all these parts of themselves. We must nourish our minds to be in good working order for ourselves and our families and for our communities. There are many threats facing our communities. Our community members are turning to drug and alcohol, violent crimes, and they struggle with low self-esteem and mental health challenges. Mr. Speaker, how do we lift up and empower people to become mentally strong and resilient? People who struggle with addictions can only recover by choice. People will only help themselves as much as they choose to. What can we do to empower people to choose well for themselves? As a fallout of colonization, people are hesitant to trust. From trusting the traditional way that have sustained ourselves for generations to trusting government services and programs. Trust is a big issue. Our residents need to know they are supported and cared for because many people feel alone. Mr. Speaker, no one should feel alone, but this is what's happening today. Some of our people are suffering. They are fighting their battles silently and behind closed doors. I would like to see more programs and supports that help our residents get back to a healthy mental balance. I will have questions for the Minister of Health later today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from the Decho. Member statements. Member from Milne Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For families, friends, and supporters of autism parents and families, the struggle is real and it's day to day. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. Mr. Speaker, when you're on the vanguard of this problem every single day, this challenge, my heart goes out to those folks who are dealing with this. They are truly angels that keep their families together. Mr. Speaker, we all know the spectrum of autism ranges from some challenges to a lot of challenges, and each one is unique, but each one is important. You know, I wish that one day, Mr. Speaker, to be clear, I wish one day there is a cure. But until those days, we must not abandon these parents to make sure that they know that their lives matter and we're with them through these challenges. But like many challenges before us, there's been so many facts and proofs out there that socialization is so critical during the formative years. So lest we forget that the important thing that happens is focus is right now on the young child, but children become teens and teens become adults. So formative constructive supports are critical because that's who they will become, with or without them. The N.W.T offers some supports, it's true. But when you're in a small community, you have very little supports. So what do? You move to a regional center. And then you quickly realize the regional centers don't have any supports or more supports, so they move to Yellowknife. And lo and behold, when they get to Yellowknife, they quickly learn there's nothing or very little here. So what do? They leave the territory, Mr. Speaker. The pittance offered for people struggling with autism is so small between the years of 0 to 6. Parents are constantly searching for opportunities. As a matter of fact, it's created a competitive process where they're constantly fighting behind the scenes, keeping ideas and opportunities secret, rather than becoming a supportive network as they rightly should. So in other words, they're hiding opportunities when I hear there's one opening in this place, but I can't tell anyone, rather than saying, I hear an opening in these places, let's make sure everyone gets a shot. Mr. Speaker, the science proves very clearly engagement, therapy, physical, and verbal supports are absolutely necessary in the early years. And the people that only end up doing this are the parents who have to either stay at home or make the sacrifices that their work will kindly support them. Mr. Speaker, I have much more for my member statement. I won't seek unanimous consent, but I'll raise the further issues in my oral questions about how we can help these people with better policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Milne Centre. Member statement. Member from Tabacha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to draw attention to an event of special cultural and social importance in Fort Smith, the Frank Rubin Pride Festival, scheduled to take place June 14th to 16th, 2024. This free community festival serves as a beacon of inclusivity, solidarity, and remembrance. The Frank Rubin Pride Festival provides a safe haven for members of the LGBTQIA2S+ community and their allies to honor the memory of Frank Rubin, a missing Indigenous person. In a world where safety and acceptance are not always guaranteed, events like this play a critical role in fostering a sense of belonging and dignity. Mr. Speaker, what makes this festival truly special is its diversified approach to advocacy and celebration, featuring local musicians, drag artists, and craftspeople, including talents from Fort Smith and various communities across the Northwest Territories. The event serves as a platform for artistic expression and cultural exchange. Through the sale of their art, participants show solidarity and support for causes close to our hearts, including missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, LGBTQIA2S+ rights, and the memory of Frank Rubin. Mr. Speaker, beyond its artistic and cultural offerings, the Frank Rubin Pride Festival is a vehicle for education and awareness. Through conversations and celebration, we aim to uplift Indigenous, Métis, Inuit, and the LGBTQIA2S+ voices, artists, and businesses, enriching our collective understanding of diversity and inclusion. Mr. Speaker, I encourage my fellow members to join me in supporting the Frank Rubin Pride Festival and its mission to create a more just and compassionate society. Let us stand together in celebrating the richness of our community and honoring the memory of those who have been lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Tabacha. Member statements. Colleagues, on April 19th, 2024, Laura Guru retired from the N.W.T. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to congratulate her in person. I heard it was a very enjoyable event and a few laughs were had. Colleagues, Laura's public service career started with the government of Manitoba right after she graduated from the University of Manitoba with a Master's of Public Administration. After a period with the government of Manitoba, she decided to take an adventure and move to the Northwest Territories. It was not going to be a permanent move, but like most people that move up north, she fell in love with the city, her new friends, and working for the government of Northwest Territories. I'm happy to say that she had a variety and successful 25-year career with the N.W.T. Laura started as a FMB analyst, going on to work in 7 different departments and eventually become Deputy Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. In all those roles, Laura had modeled the characteristics of a true public servant through her commitment to improve the lives of the N.W.T. residents, activities of our communities, while balancing those objectives that need to be accountable to the public. She has reminded us of the importance of seeking truth to power, as well as the role of public servants to implement the mandate and priorities of the government that we serve. During our time together, we were able to get a lot done in the 2.5 years. Just to name a few, the EMO, DFAA, completing the municipal funding pots in the 19th Assembly, even though it was set for the 20th. Oh, and how I forgot the 2 years of floods and last year's fire season, where we had to evacuate 11 communities, which was over 70% of our residents. As I said, we had a few laughs, which I'd like to share one with you here today. After the 2021 flood, the DM and Laura spent weeks trying to come up with a plan how they were going to convince me to move 5 regional sport and rec positions to the EMO positions. They even spoke to my MSA to see how I would react to this idea. I still remember how they both looked after presenting the idea to me, and I agreed with them. It was like the IKEA commercial. Remember when the wife comes running out of the store telling her husband, start the car before the IKEA could change their mind about the stuff they sold her? Colleagues, before I close, I have part of the speech done by the ADM at a retirement party that I'd like the Dean read and printed in the hansard. In closing, I'd like to thank her for all her service and important improvements for residents' life. I wish her all the best on her next adventures. Thank you. Member statements. Member statements. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Colleagues, before we go to you, I'd like to recognize a special young lady in the audience, Colleen Welburn. Thank you very much for coming here and keeping track of your husband. You know, he's well behaved today because you're here, so thank you. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize a constituent of mine, who also happens to be my lovely wife, the love of my life, Colleen Wellborn. She's here today, and whilst I have been here working on behalf of all of our neighbors, she's been holding down the fort at home, and I couldn't do it without her. Thank you so much for being here.
Hear, hear.
Visitors in the gallery. Member from Tabacha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize 2 young people from P.W. Kaiser High School are here as pages today. Anthony Roberts and Shane Sumertuk. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate your service.
Thank you, member from Tabacha. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize, I can't see him, but Tony Brushett, the Executive Director of the Salvation Army, who is a Yellowknife North resident, as well as the Salvation Army itself being within my riding. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Member for recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize a constituent. She's well known to all of us. It's Miss Sarah Cleary. She's not only one of our wonderful and dependable translators who served the House for so many years, she's also known as the sewer extraordinaire. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to wish her well. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife Centre. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. If we missed anybody, we'd like to thank you very much for being here in your house and allowing us to do our job for the residents of Northwest Territories. Reports on Committee of Review of Bills. Reports of Committee on Review of Bills. Reports on Standing Committee and Standing and Special Committees. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, your Standing Committee on Public Accounts is pleased to provide its report of the review of the 2022 to 2023 public accounts. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member for N.W.T, that Committee Report 7-20 brackets 1, Standing Committee on Public Accounts report on the review of the 2022 to 2023 public accounts be deemed read and printed in Hansard in its entirety. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Range Lake. Motion in order. To the motion. Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member for N.W.T, that Committee Report 7-20 brackets 1, Standing Committee on Public Accounts report on the review of the 2022 to 2023 public accounts be received and adopted by the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Motion's in order. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the honourable member from N.W.T, that pursuant to Rule 9.1 brackets 5 brackets A, the Government of the Northwest Territories table a comprehensive response to this report, including all recommendations within 120 days or at the earliest opportunity subsequent to the passage of 120 days. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Range Lake. Motion's in order. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion's passed. Yeah. Reports on standing and special committees. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment is pleased to provide its reports on committee initiatives of a project to conduct a review of the land and water use permitting regulatory framework and commends it to the House. Scope of the review, Mr. Speaker. The Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment would like to inform the 20th Legislative Assembly that committee is in the early stages of conducting a review of the regulatory framework for land and water use permitting under the Mackenzie Valley Resource Management Act and its operational effectiveness. The MVRMA provides the overreaching framework for a robust regulatory regime, and committee would like to evaluate the underlying process and requirements and their interpretation by all parties to ensure the spirit and the intent of the MVRMA is being met, and to assess the N.W.T's role in the system. The committee's review intends to build on the work already done by subject matter experts across the land and water boards, Indigenous governments, and the Government of the Northwest Territories, the Government of Canada, and the other stakeholders who interact with the land and water use permitting process. Committee has particular interest in examining how the N.W.T can provide further supports, make changes where needed and appropriate, and consider ways to enhance the capacity of parties to meaningfully participate in the land and water use permitting process, It is committee's intent to prepare reports on the findings which will describe committee's observations and recommend targeted actions and interventions the GNB should consider for improving the administration, effectiveness, efficiency, and of the regulatory framework. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Milne Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member for Frame Lake, that the committee report 8-20(1) Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment report on the committee's initiative of a project to conduct a review of the land and water use permitting regulatory framework be received and adopted by the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Milne Centre. To the motion.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Reports on standing committee or standing special committees. Reports on standing special committees. Returns to oral questions. Returns to oral questions. Acknowledgement. Member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the community of Toledo is proud to celebrate their 7 graduates from the Chief Albert Wright School for 2024. They are Damien McPherson, Osate Bird, Jaden Wrigley, Tristan McCauley-Aya, Jaden Lenny, Lacey Wrigley, and Rachel Horsey on their achievement. Toledo celebrates their success, and we wish them very well in the coming years and their next steps on their education and career journey. Mussy.
Thank you. Member from the Statute. Acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. Oral questions. Oral questions. Member from Yellow Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maybe just a quick comment before I get into my question. I think members are restraining some of their questions to help the process move along, so maybe not all, of course. That said, Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education, Culture and Employment with respect to autism supports and programming. Mr. Speaker, parents have to cover PD days, daycare, after-school program times, and summer programs, and it's having an impact on families and the relationships of friends and supporters. And I'm going to ask the Minister of Education, what can she do to further some policy initiatives to support these types of parents who are dealing with children with autism that need strengths and sometimes even one-on-one supports. Thank you.
Member from Milne Centre. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we have heard from education bodies across the Northwest Territories, and specifically people who are in the role of classroom support positions, is that they wanted to have a fuller toolbox to be able to help students. And so one of the programs that ECE worked with education bodies to put into place over the course of the last few years was training for classroom assistants through a partnership that was formed with Douglas College, which I look forward to speaking about more in the House this week. And we are just graduating our first cohort of classroom assistants through that program. And this is a very unique program in that the classroom assistants were able to do the training from their home community while still supporting students in the classroom. Thank you.
Education, Culture, Employment. Member from Milne Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's certainly welcome news. I wouldn't necessarily say it isn't. So back to my specific question is what policy changes can be done to help parents who have to take time off of work when there's PD days, there's no after-school programs that support them, no daycares, and even including the full summer break when their young people need full-time care, part-time care, one-on-one care, etc. What can the department do to support policy initiatives that support these parents with autistic children? Thank you.
Milne Centre, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a funding pot that is referenced as SKIP. That is available to licensed center-based early learning and childcare facilities. It promotes staff training to help with the development of inclusive programming, provides guidance, resources, and support to create appropriate spaces, and supports staff positions that can provide one-to-one support for children. Mr. Speaker, I absolutely hear the member, though, that what I am hearing from not only the member but from residents of the territory is that they are looking for more support. And what I would want to ensure is that, first of all, that we are addressing this in a way that is most effective for what parents are looking for. In a way that doesn't just throw money at it, but also throws resources that are appropriate to what families are looking for. So I would love to hear some suggestions of exactly what it is the member would like to see. Thank you.
Minister of Education, Culture and Employment, member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister mentions first of all, the SKIP program. Yes, but it's very limited funding, and hence, when there only creates 1 or 2 openings, there are still dozens upon dozens of parents struggling to find support. And if you don't have a fantastic employer who's supportive of your challenges, you have to take days off. And if you have an employment position, such as a very unique one or professional, you can't take time off sometimes. That's just the nature of your work. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is would the Minister be willing to meet with a group of parents and advocates for the autism community, which doesn't just represent Yellowknife but the territory at large? Would she be willing to sit down with them and see if she could help them develop policy initiatives to support these people struggling with these day-to-day challenges?
Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am absolutely more than happy to sit down with anybody. That is one of our key jobs as ministers, as we spend a lot of time in meetings making sure that we understand what it is that residents of the Northwest Territories are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Final supplementary, member from Yellowknife Centre.
I'm okay, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions, member from Yellowknife Centre. Oh.
Again?
Member from Great Slave. I was looking.
There's not even a lake mix-up on this one.
I don't have a lake. I mean, even though I'm named after a lake. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Would the Health Minister commit to updating public-facing communications around whether a person needs to call the registrar before or after applying a name change in order to avoid being dead named in the N.W.T. Gazette? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Got that right this time. Member for Health, or Minister of Health and Social Services.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are committed to doing that.
Minister of Health and Social Services, member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that yes from the Minister. I also want to thank the Minister for her commitment that the form will be changed and reviewed. Hopefully changed, but definitely reviewed. But can I get confirmation from the Minister that a gender-based analysis will be done during the review of the form to consider intersectional factors that may increase barriers for transgender or other gender identities? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Great Slave, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very much in favor of completing the gender-based analysis. At this time, majority of the health forms have been completed, including an identification of steps needed to make the health forms more gender inclusive. And this, we are near the completion of this, and the new health information system. The department will finalize its review of the needed revisions to the health forms and the related legislation that needs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to take that as a strong maybe. Mr. Speaker, the application form for an N.W.T healthcare card also only presents a gender binary. Can the Minister commit to, in conjunction with her Cabinet colleagues, disclosing which G&WT forms are bound by legislation or regulation to include sex or gender in a binary fashion so that they can also be changed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I cannot commit every department, but what I can commit is providing the member with a list of the health legislation where the forms that are included in the legislation that aren't inclusive, and that we will, as we are looking at a lot of the legislation and making sure that we're reviewing those. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Social Services. Final supplementary. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Cabinet can expect a bunch of BFs. Mr. Speaker, having to correct your gender to multiple locums on an ongoing basis can be demoralizing. Can the Minister speak to further changes that can be made to electronic medical record systems and patient charting so to be as more inclusive of gender diverse folks? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the member of the demoralizing for the folks that have to go through this, and yes, we do see a lot of locums, and unfortunately at this time that is not possible in our electronic medical records to other than the male-female genders, but the requirements that are going to be the things that we are working towards in the new EMR will include that for the system to be able to do that. But thank you that we've had these discussions between the minister and the member. Is that knowing that I've worked in these systems, and that there are other things within our EMR that can help to identify. So in the meantime, we can work with the authorities to find a way for our current electronic medical records to have like an alert or some sort that they may have to identify, but I can't guarantee that this will be across the board, as it is a temporary fix until we get our new EMR. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll direct my questions to the Minister of Executive Indigenous Affairs, the Premier, but I know that homelessness is an issue that spans across departments, so I'll leave him to redirect if necessary, and this kind of illustrates part of the conundrum we're in with the issues spanning across different mandates and departments here. So the Salvation Army believes that we need a bigger and purpose-built shelter facility operating 24/7 in Yellowknife in order to meet the growing needs to be more cost-efficient and offer wraparound services. So will the proposed Yellowknife Wellness and Recovery Centre be designed to meet those kinds of needs? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North. Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's no conundrum here. We all work together, and the Minister of Health and Social Services can answer all of the members' questions, so I would like to redirect it to her. Thank you.
Mr. Premier. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Wellness and Recovery Centre is intended to replace the temporary day shelter and the sobering centre, and the capacity is approximately about 85 people during the day, with an overnight capacity of 31 designated sleeping spaces, which currently we only have 22, so that increases that. But the facility is also built to be flexible and the ability to provide an approximately 35 additional sleeping spaces if necessary. Thank you.
Mr. Health and Social Services. Member from Yellowknife North.
Okay, thank you for that. Can the minister explain whether the sleeping spaces are specifically designated for those in the sobering center, or they're for anyone who's needing an emergency shelter, whether they're intoxicated or not? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at this time, the plan for the Wellness and Recovery Centre is to provide services to those who are intoxicated, because some of the other shelters aren't able to accommodate them. So that is what the Wellness and Recovery Centre will accommodate. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister explain what she might be able to do now to help nonprofits who are operating emergency shelters be able to cope and address the growing crisis that we're facing here in Yellowknife? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are currently working to streamline the funding sources to reduce reporting burdens and increase training opportunities to strengthen the overall capacity. And through the implementation of the integrated service delivery, we aim to increase efficiencies and wraparound supports for our most vulnerable residents to ensure that they are getting the services, supports they are needed in a timely manner, and ensuring that NGOs are part of this process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Final supplementary. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So can the minister tell us when will we be able to see more transitional housing units planned for Yellowknife to help those who are currently on the street struggling with addictions and trauma? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Yellowknife North. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, currently we have one transitional housing program for addiction recovery plan for Yellowknife. It will have the capacity of 5 individuals at a time. This is a new program, and so we will be monitoring it closely to better understand the need before we consider any possible expansions. That, you know, we have one going in Yellowknife, we have one going in Inuvik, we have 2 in the queue that have put forward their proposals. So, you know, there are many other communities that are also requesting these types of facilities. So what we want to make sure over this next year is that once we get the 2 operating, that we do a fulsome review, that if there's things that we need to change in the way that we're working together with the NGOs to support them, or, you know, we need to make sure that before we expand it out even farther. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Moultrie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hope the Premier had a chance to read the statement from yesterday, because I'm continuing with my statement from yesterday on Chief Jimmy Bruno residents. So this is a question for the Premier. Can the Premier explain if there have been any discussions with the federal government regarding residential school settlements and the residential school historical record in the N.W.T? Thank you.
Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, I've not had a chance to review the member statement. I just flew back into town this morning, so I won't have good answers to the members' questions. I apologize. Thank you.
Mr. Premier. Member from Moultrie.
I will continue because there are some he can answer, and I will do a written question as well. So can the Premier describe why the residents or boarding homes associated with the Chief Jimmy Bruno School are not recognized as part of the residential school system?
Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would have to go back. This was an issue that I dealt with as the Minister of ECE, so I would have to go back and look at that, but I imagine it might have something to do with the fact that it was I believe the Doggerib Divisional Education Authority that was actually overseeing those residents. They weren't GNWT run in the same way that they were elsewhere or church run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Oral questions, member from Moultrie.
Thank you. Has the GNWT discussed residential school settlement for the N.W.T. residential school survivors with Indigenous leadership? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Moultrie. Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not aware of any of those discussions happening. Thank you.
Premier. Final supplementary, member from Moultrie.
Thank you. I want to ask the Premier, what advice can the Premier provide former residential school survivors of Chief Jimmy Bruno School? Are there any options available to these people to receive recognition and compensation for their experience? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Moultrie. Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From my understanding, the day school, the residential school settlements, other similar settlements were all initiated through the courts, through lawsuits, class action lawsuits, and that is the path, I believe, that has been proved most successful over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Oral questions, member from Trinidad-Willowdale.
Mr. Speaker, the status quo for Indigenous education is not working. The government of Northwest Territories has to implement UNDRIP, and that means fixing up the territory's education system so it works for Indigenous children and carry it out in collaboration with Indigenous governments. My question is to the Minister of ECE. Will the Minister commit to allowing Indigenous students to apply through student financial assistance for both supplementary grants and the remissible loan? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Tunde-Willity. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ECE completed a review of the SFA program just in the last Assembly, with the goals to ensure that it was meeting the needs of N.W.T students to pursue their post-secondary education goals. The changes were in alignment as much of the work that we do and the new work that we do with the Truth and Reconciliation of Canada calls to action, as well as the report on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, with the aim of better supporting Indigenous students with financial assistance to access post-secondary. And so that led to specific changes being made for Northern Indigenous students in the program, which increased the supplementary grant to help with their monthly living expenses and to remove the limit of semesters that can be accessed by students as well, Mr. Speaker. The SFA program offers monthly living allowance to students through either the supplementary grant or the remissible loan. And just so that everybody is aware, the grants are not repayable to the Government of the Northwest Territories. Remissible loans may be forgiven if a student returns to the N.W.T after they've completed their schooling, but otherwise will be considered repayable. And students who receive the remissible loans must remain within that $60,000 loan limit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Tunde-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister commit to establishing an educational bodies that align with regional boundaries of existing treaties, and those treaties still under investigation, under negotiation, and work with Indigenous governments to determine the governance of those bodies? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Tunde-Willity, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of my tasks and very exciting and important tasks over the life of this term is to begin work on the modernization of the Education Act, and that work will be done in collaboration with Indigenous governments, and so I could very well see this being part of the conversation. One of the cautions I would put out there is that the treaties currently under negotiation that do not yet have boundaries established, there are some of them, so we wouldn't know what those would be. And then under, for example, Treaty 8 and Treaty 11, the geographies are quite large, and so you might end up with very large education bodies that may be deemed kind of unfeasible. And so I look forward to having these conversations when we do review the Education Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Tunde-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister commit to working with Indigenous governments, including the Dene Nation, to help them reclaim education, to preserve their traditional culture and knowledges, and so that they pass on from one generation to the next generation for education to be available in their traditional language? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Tunde-Willity, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conversations in communities and with Indigenous governments that happened in the previous Assembly, immersion education was one of the top things that our committee at that time consistently heard about. And so I absolutely expect that this will be a key component of the conversation when we do review the Education Act. But that being said, Mr. Speaker, there is an Indigenous languages and education policy in place today in support of education bodies and welcoming all students within learning environments that center respect and promote Indigenous worldviews, culture, and languages in our classrooms. In addition to that, there's the Indigenous Languages and Education Handbook, which is now being implemented in all schools across the N.W.T. And this was developed with the guidance of Dene, Métis, Inuvialuit, and N.W.T. Cree to help inform and guide efforts to indigenize education. And then there is also the Our Languages curriculum, which was released and implemented in our classrooms and is really truly a groundbreaking curriculum in the Northwest Territories and something that the N.W.T should be very proud of. But I very much look forward to continuing conversations about immersion education across the Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Final supplementary, member from Trinidad-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister commit to revising the N.W.T education funding framework away from an inequality-based orientated to an equity-based approach so that small communities can access more educational and wellness programming? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Trinidad-Willity, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the current school funding framework does distribute funding based on a base level of funding, enrollment-based funding as well, a Northern Context Index, which depends on the location of the school, consumer price increases, as well as targeted funding, for example, for inclusive schooling. But I fully expect that the funding formula will also be a huge topic of conversation as we review the Education Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Oral questions. Member from Detroit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Minister of Health. Can the Minister commit to improving mental health training and crisis response to mental health coordinators and health center staff in small communities? Thank you.
Member from Detroit, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I can commit to the member to following up with the department to see what training the mental health workers in the Detroit communities are receiving and reach out to see if there's future things that they need training with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Detroit.
Thank you, and thank you to the Minister for that. Can the Minister, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister commit to ensuring that any mental health training provided to health center staff is also offered to all NGOs in the community that work directly with the public? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Detroit, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, what I can do is I can check with the department to see what type of outreach training that we do provide to NGOs, or if there's funding dollars available for NGOs to access within the communities. Like I was saying before, mental health and addictions, there is pots of money for each community to access for the Suicide Prevention Fund. They could be used to, for training within the community if that's what the community wishes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions, member from the Detroit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for that. Mr. Speaker, we know that many people struggle with addictions for addictions treatment. Can the Minister describe how often the N.W.T makes referrals for treatment based solely on mental health? Thank you.
Member from the Detroit, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have that level of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. One supplementary. Member from the Detroit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister provide that information to me, and can the Minister commit to multi-year funding agreements for organizations that offer on-the-land programs? Thank you.
Member from Detroit, 2 questions. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, I know that we have the stats on a territorial-wide. When we start going down into smaller communities, it's harder and harder to be able to give numbers because they're so small that they may identify people. So what I can do is I can provide the information that we do have on what people are going out and if there is addictions or mental wellness is a territory-wide. Thank you. And to the multi-year funding question, in my minister's statement today, the Community Wellness and Addiction Recovery Fund, that fund there can be applied through multi-year funding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to my statement on education and the graduation season, my question is to the Minister of Education on sponsoring and supporting on the spirits of reconciliation and the improvements to the Education Act. Will the Minister assist my office in organizing a strategic planning session with the Statute Divisional Board of Education? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from the Statute, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is my understanding that in 2019, so almost some years ago now, that the Statute leadership came together to discuss issues of education and a vision for the future of education in the region, and that this led to a 5-year strategic plan that will be expiring in June of 2025. So I appreciate the member for bringing this forward, because it sounds like the timing is right. And so if leadership from across the Statute decides to come together in a education conference next summer, I would be more than happy to attend and to listen into this and have the opportunity to hear the concerns from the region. And I think it's also worth noting as well that in October of this year, the Statute education body will be coming together for a conference of their own and an in-service, and so it sounds like there's some potential for some good synergies happening around the same times here. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Minister for recapping the efforts that we had accomplished in July of 2019. It was a very well-attended strategy session on how to upgrade and develop a plan moving forward to support education. And I'm glad to hear that the Minister support that as a starting point to update our education journey for the young folks of the Statute. And will the Minister provide staff supports there to help organize and put together the appropriate meeting packages in preparation for that session? Thank you.
Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like the opportunity to find out from the member exactly what it is that he is looking for as far as support, and be able to find out how we can help one another make sure that this happens. But I'd like to better understand what it is that he's looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Education, Culture and Employment. Member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Minister. Just to kind of share the moving forward, we can take the 5-year 2019 strategy plan, update that to a 2024 package, and see how we can extend and improve that. Since then, there was a lot of challenges, so that'll be a good starting point to upgrade the 5-year Statute education plan here. Call it the 2019 5-year plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from the Statute, Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear a question, but I very much look forward to discussing with the member, and absolutely very much look forward to hopefully traveling to the Statute. Thank you.
Oral questions. Member for Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we continue on into our fire season, I'd like to ask the Minister of MACA some questions about our emergency management legislation, specifically the regulations. In other jurisdictions, command, control, and coordination systems are present in regulations that require local authorities to establish EMOs that all use the same system. So there's a consistent approach across the board, and typically it's the instant command system. Can the Minister tell me what regulations are in place under the Act to ensure consistent approaches to emergency planning and operations in all of our communities? Thank you.
Range Lake, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, with the Act and the regulations, we don't have detailed to that level. However, I am looking forward after action review is complete to reviewing all these documents to see what changes need to or may need to be changed. Currently, MACA does offer the Incident Command System training, the ICS 100, to all community levels, but we do not mandate it at this time. So, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, Municipal and Community Affairs. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what work is already underway to review the regulations or absence of regulations, I suppose, as we currently have it? Thank you.
Member from Range Lake, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I'm aware of is nothing has been fully done or looked at yet until the after action review is complete that we're currently doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, given that we don't know exactly what's going to come out of the after action review, but presumably there's going to be something around here. Will the minister commit to implementing regulations that ensure that ICS is followed in all communities and that communities have to establish EMOs that use the system so we can ensure we're using the right system that works for us? Thank you.
From Range Lake, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ICS program is a nationally and internationally recognized program. It's a common one that's used for these types of incidents. I'm interested in looking at this and seeing what we can do to develop it. However, I don't know what our grounds are on fully dictating to the communities what their EMO structures may look like, but at the end of the day, the department does work with the communities to establish these guidelines and assist them in developing them, which also includes recommending the type of training and offering some free training to the communities so that they essentially will fall in line. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Final supplementary, member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we're on the same page, but I do hope that the minister will look to mandating best practices for EMOs in the Northwest Territories. Can you ensure the House that he will do that and provide support for those best practices through training and planning support? Thank you.
Member from Range Lake, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we pretty much already do a lot of that stuff. We do offer the community support with the development of these the emergency plans and also provide the training. So yes, I will consider what the member is requesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Oral questions. Oral questions. Written questions. Written questions. Returns to written questions. Returns to written questions. Replies to the Commissioner's address. Replies to the Commissioner's address. Petitions. Petitions. Tabling of documents. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following 3 documents regarding public participation in a regional study under Part 5.2 of the Mackenzie Valley Resource Management Act. The first is a letter dated December 6, 2023 from Alternatives North to the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs. Second is a letter from the Assistant Deputy Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada to Alternatives North. And the third is a letter dated January 30th, 2024 from the Minister of Environment and Climate Change to Alternatives North. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Yellowknife North. Tabling of documents, tabling of documents. Notice of motion. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on Thursday, June 13th, 2024, I'll move the following motion. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the member for Range Lake, that the government of the Northwest Territories provide a response to tabled document 118 20 brackets 1, so dash 20 brackets 1, and table it in the House within 120 days. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Yellowknife Center. Notice of motion. Member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on Thursday, June 13, I will move the following motion. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the member of the Mackenzie Delta, that the government of the Northwest Territories update the business case to complete the Mackenzie Valley Highway immediately, and further that the government of the Northwest Territories use the updated business case to formalize Indigenous partners in the project and to lobby the federal government in partnership to secure the funding requirement in the upcoming federal budget to develop this critical infrastructure for the territories in Canada. And furthermore, that the government of the Northwest Territories provide a response to this motion within 120 days. Much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from the Statute. Notice of motion. Member from the Decho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on Thursday, June 13, 2024, I will move the following motion. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the member of Vermont, that the government of the Northwest Territories provide the 10% funding needed for the installation of temporary housing and enterprise. And further, that the government of the Northwest Territories align the Territorial Disaster Financial Assistance Program to leverage the 90% contribution provided under Canada's Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangements, and furthermore that the government of the Northwest Territories immediately communicate with the Hamlet of Enterprise its intention to fully participate in the installation of temporary housing and enterprise. And furthermore that the government of the Northwest Territories provide a response to this motion within 120 days. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from the Decho. Notice of motion. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on Thursday, June 13th, 2024, I will move the following motion. I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Hay River North, that notwithstanding Rule 2.1, when this House adjourns on Thursday, June 13th, 2024, it shall be adjourned until Thursday, October 17th, 2024. And further, that any time prior to October 17th, 2024, if the Speaker is satisfied after consultation with the Executive Council and members of the Legislative Assembly that the public interest requires that the House should meet at an earlier time during the adjournment, the Speaker may give notice, and thereupon the House shall meet at the time stated in such notice and shall transact its business as it has been duly adjourned to that time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Notice of motion. Notice of motion. Motions. Motions. Notice of motion, first reading of bills. Notice of motions, first reading of bills. First reading of bills. Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to present to the House Bill 7, Miscellaneous Statute Law Amendment Act 2024, to be read for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from, or Minister of Justice. First reading of bills. Member from Yellowknife Center. Glenn, was there a script?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to present to the House Bill 8, an act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act, to be read for the first time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you. Member from Yellowknife Center. First reading of bills. First reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Consideration in Committee of the Whole and bills and other matters. Table documents 93-20 brackets 1. Table documents 111-20 brackets 1. This House stands at, oops, no, that's not it. Wrong one. I was kicking you guys out already. As Speaker, I authorize the House to sit beyond the House daily hours of adjournment until 8, no time, until consideration of the business of the House is completed, with the member from Tuna Day Willity in the chair.
Calling the committee to order. What is the wish of the committee? I will go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the Committee of the Whole wishes to consider Table Document 93-20, Bracket 1, 2024-2025 main estimates, the Departments of Industry, Tourism and Investment, and Housing Northwest Territories. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Does committee agree? Thank you. We'll take a short recess, and we'll start in about 15 minutes. Okay, we're going to start up. Members, we have agreed to review table documents 93-20 brackets 1. Department of Industry, Tourism and Investment will resume with key activity tourism and parks on page 247. Is that one? Okay. Does the Minister of ITI wish to bring witnesses into the House? Minister. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses into the chamber. Okay. Thank you. Would the Minister please introduce her witnesses?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, to my left, I have Deputy Minister Pamela Strand, and to my right, I have Nina Salvador, who is the Director of Corporate Management and Finance.
Okay, thank you. Members, there are additional questions on this key activity. Yesterday on page 243 to 247, we stopped at 746, so we're going to continue on. Is there any questions from the members on pages 243 with information items on 247? See no further questions. I'm going to continue on to please turn to page 244. Industry, Tourism and Investment, Tourism and Parks Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 main estimates, $17,226,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Are there any additional information items from pages 248 to 252? Are there any questions? Thank you, members. Please return now to the department summary found on page 227 and revenue summary on information items on page 228. Are there any questions? Seeing no further questions, committee, I will now call the department summary, industry, tourism and investment operational expenditure, total department 2024-2025 main estimates, $63,392,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that this committee defer further consideration of the main estimates for the Department of Industry, Tourism and Investment at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. To the motion, the motion is in order. To the motion. The question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion is carried. Consideration of Department of Industry and Tourism and Investment Operational Expenditure 2024-2025 main estimates. Total department is deferred. Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the witnesses for appearing before us. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses from the chambers. Consideration in Committee of the Whole of Bills and Other Matters 2024-2025 Main Estimates, Housing, Northwest Territories. Committee, we have agreed to consider table documents 93-20 brackets 1, 2024-2025 Main Estimates. We will not consider Housing, Northwest Territories. Committee, Housing, Northwest Territories is included in the main estimates as information and the totals are not votable. We will continue to review these estimates as we have for the previous considered departments. However, we will not vote on the totals. If members have comments or questions, they can be raised at the appropriate time. Minister, please proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you. I am pleased to be here today to present the 2024-2025 main estimates for housing N.W.T. Overall, the corporation's estimates propose an operating budget of over $120 million, representing a decrease of $12.76 million from the 23-24 main estimates. This decline in annual funding is primarily related to the sunset of short-term funding from the federal government and funding for short-term initiatives from the N.W.T to assist housing N.W.T in developing partnerships with others delivering on housing projects in the Northwest Territories by cost sharing on approved housing projects under the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's co-investment and rapid housing programs. A smaller portion of this decline relates to the adjustments that were made to support our government's fiscal sustainability initiative. Housing N.W.T's 24-25 main estimates also includes the following incremental funding allocations from the N.W.T. A $1 million initiative contribution from the Government Northwest Territories to assist housing N.W.T in cost-sharing the continued delivery of the Canada Housing Benefit Program, supporting access to affordable private rental options, and a $567,000 allocation received under the new Gender-Based Violence Funding Agreement with the Department of Executive and Indigenous Affairs to enhance the Northern Pathways to Housing program. In addition to this $120 million operating budget for 24-25, it is also important to note that with financial support from both the federal government and the Government Northwest Territories, Housing N.W.T is currently constructing 150 housing units and advancing over 390 renovation projects throughout the Northwest Territories, valued at over $107 million. This delivery, comprised of current projects and carryover projects from the prior years of $93 million, includes much-needed new public housing units, the replacement of aged public housing stock, transitional housing projects, and numerous modernization and improvement repair projects across the territory and various biomass alternative energy investments. In addition to supporting responsible spending, these estimates align with the priorities of the 20th Legislative Assembly by directly investing in areas that support the suitability, accessibility, and affordability of housing in our territory, improving housing outcomes by contributing to a strong economic foundation for the Northwest Territories, supporting healing from trauma and positive outcomes through a planned transitional housing partnership with the Department of Health and Social Services, and investing in initiatives to mitigate and adapt to the increasing risk of climate change, to name a few. Recognizing that no single government or organization can improve housing outcomes and address the core need alone, I look forward to continued conversations with Canada, Indigenous governments, community governments, non-governmental organizations, industry, and other housing delivery agents towards developing housing solutions appropriate for the Northwest Territories. Important to these conversations will be completing the housing needs assessment to get a clearer picture of the total amount and types of housing required along the housing continuum. That information will anchor future funding conversations with our partners in the federal government, as well as working with Indigenous governments about long-term sustainable financial solutions for housing. In closing, the 24-25 main estimates allow Housing Northwest Territories to continue to implement its capital plan and invest available resources in our current stock. We will then, in turn, focus significant efforts towards this strategic approach to addressing core housing needs in the Northwest Territories with all our partners. This concludes my opening remarks. Koinaini.
Thank you. Does the Minister responsible for Housing Northwest Territories wish to bring witnesses into the House?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Does the committee agree? Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses into the chambers. Would the Minister introduce her witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to introduce Eleanor Young, who is the President and CEO of Housing Northwest Territories. And to my right is Mr. Jim Martin, who's the Vice President of Finance with Housing N.W.T. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does committee agree to forego general comments on Housing Northwest Territories? Thank you. Seeing no more general comments, does the committee agree to proceed to the detail contained in the tabled documents? Agreed? Thank you. Committee will defer the total and review the estimates by activity summary, beginning with community housing services starting on page 382 with information items on page 383 and 384. Are there any questions? Going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, are we going to come back to page 379 at the end? Is that the idea? Okay.
Go ahead. Wait for your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so knowing that, I'll save that question for later, but I just wanted to turn to the business plan. So there's a couple commitments in there. I think that they probably fall into the community housing services area. The first one is the completion of a housing needs assessment. I've spoken to that a few times and am supportive of them doing that, of housing doing that. Note that it's noted for March 31st, 2026. Is there a possibility that they could get that needs assessment done sooner than that date?
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In speaking to Housing N.W.T, I have encouraged that we get the housing needs assessment done sooner rather than later, and we're hoping to have something done for winter 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Okay, thank you very much to the Minister for that. I really appreciate the additional emphasis on timeline for that. I think that document is going to be crucial for us kind of determining the need, quantifying the problem. Continuing on with that, along that thread, there's the needs assessment for new stock, and then there's what we already have. So I was pleased to see in the business plan, page 255, develop an updated infrastructure deficit assessment for Housing N.W.T's owned residential assets to identify current and long-term capital investment needs. So the target is that we're going to have a current housing infrastructure deficit assessment. There is no timeline associated with that one as there is for the needs assessment. So I'm just wondering if the minister can give us an update on perhaps a timeline that could be included on that item in the business plan.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Same timeline. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to note that it is the same timeline as the housing needs assessment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to the minister. I really appreciate you pushing the department on this. I'm very excited to have both of those highly informative documents. Well, I hope they're highly informative, because I just want to emphasize the importance of those in making decisions going forward. I've been speaking in the House a fair bit about our infrastructure deficit that we have in the Northwest Territories, both private and public, but we got to focus on what we're in control of here at N.W.T. But until we kind of quantify this problem and come up with a long-term plan to address it, it is going to continue to hang over our heads. The Assembly has said that housing is our #1 priority. I want us to put our money where our mouth is. So I would like to see us come up with a costed plan for addressing the deficit once we quantified it. So very much appreciate the minister accelerating the timeline for those two documents, because I think that they will be crucial to us making future decisions. I think that's all I need to say on this aspect of the business plan for now. I have some questions about what Housing N.W.T is doing over the next year, but that's going to be captured on page 379. So I'll leave my comments at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from members on this page item? Seeing none, no further questions. I'll remind the committee that the estimates for housing in Northwest Territories are included as an information item only. The committee will not be voting on the activity total. Moving on to the homelessness program, starting on page 385, with information items on page 387. Are there any questions? Seeing no further questions, we will now be voting. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry, Frame Lake, the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're moving so quickly here. I think there's probably a few of us that have some questions on these, but we're just getting ahead of us there, though I do appreciate you running a tight ship. On the Housing First programming, when I was serving on the Yellowknife Housing Authority previous to taking this on this role, we were hearing a lot of concerns from folks in public housing who were sharing space with Housing First program, that the kind of mixed use of the building was causing a lot of problems for people. You know, people who are trying to raise young children in the same building where people are experiencing pretty severe addictions issues and the kind of fallout from that. I was just wondering if the minister or the department is live to this issue, has a plan to address it, or has any comments on kind of ensuring that the Housing First program is implemented in such a way that it can best be set up to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand, and I've heard of the many concerns around the Housing First program and the implementation of the program within the city of Yellowknife. Perhaps I can allow the president of Housing N.W.T to talk more about the Housing First program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the president.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, to confirm, the Housing N.W.T is live to the concern and has had meetings with the program or the deliverers of the Housing First program, and is looking to see if we cannot find funding solutions to allow them to have their own space for the delivery of their programs, and also to be able to expand their programs. And that's the desire of those delivering the program, to be able to do so. And it would make more sense to be able to have adequate and appropriate space for them. So we will work with them with that goal in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member to Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I do want to note on this page is just I'm very happy to see that we didn't make any cuts that I can see to these homelessness programs. That's absolutely what I want to see, and I was quite pleased to see that there's been a fairly significant increase to the Northern Pathways to Housing program. Can the Minister just speak to what those funding increases are going to be utilized for?
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I have President Eleanor Young speak on the Northern Pathways for Housing program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In her opening comments, the Minister spoke to some additional funding we've received through the Gender-Based Violence Program, and so that is where this funding is being targeted to be able to expand this area of our programming with that funding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the Minister and her staff are making me quite a happy member this afternoon. I'm very happy to see these increases to funding, very happy to hear answers about fast-tracking our needs assessments. I think this is great to see. So appreciate the work they're doing on this. Of course, I'll always support more funding towards these programs and would happily support SUPs coming in from the Minister when they receive more funding for programs like this, because they are really crucial to getting people into housing in our communities. So thank you very much. Those are my comments on this page for now.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Greensleeve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question. It might require follow-up questions for the Minister. I'm just noting here on the operation expenditures summary for emergency shelters. So the main estimates for 24-25 and 23-24 are the same. However, the actuals for the 23-24 and the 22-23 year are much higher. It is my assumption that the estimates and the actuals are different because of the cost to run the overnight shelters in Yellowknife. Is that correct, Mr. Chair? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The cost differential in the revised estimates with the main estimates for 24-25 are related to the Inuvik shelter, and the Inuvik homeless shelter and warming shelter are internally resourced by Housing N.W.T. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Greensleeve.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm mixing up health and social services and housing. I apologize. So I guess a follow-up question to that would be, if we know the cost difference is basically an extra $2 million every year over year, why are we budgeting less? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The information I've received is that we have expanded our shelter network throughout the Northwest Territories, and we're working to gain more funding for the homeless shelters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to the member from Greensleeve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any timeline associated with that that funding that they're seeking? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have a timeline yet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Greensleeve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of a comment than a question. If that's the case, maybe budget higher. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Next on my list I got is the member from Monfouy.
In June 2023, part of the 19th Legislative Assembly, we passed a motion here for long-term tenants, for housing, for housing or houses to be transferred to long-term tenants who lived in it for over 20, 30 years. So I just want to know, since that time, to be a homeowner, that's what we asked for. Since that time, I just want to ask the minister to date, how many houses were transferred to long-term tenants in the N.W.T?
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will turn to President Eleanor Young for that response.
Thank you. I want to go to the president.
It's okay. Do you have the number? Do you have the head number? Thank you, Mr. Chair. 39 have been completed, and I believe we have another 40 to 50 in process at the time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Montfouille.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's good to know. Another one too is that here, we're on page 384, maintenance. Okay, the budget went down from 2022 to 2023 to 13 million this fiscal year. So can the minister tell us, does this, well, it's not lots, you know, but I just want to know if this supports all 33 communities.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The maintenance budget for community housing services supports all local housing authorities throughout the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to the member from Montfouille.
Thank you. So with that amount, so how much is allocated to Cleacher region of that amount?
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to turn over to Vice President Jim Martin here, and he'll get the exact numbers for the MLA. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A total of 2.3 million has been allocated to the Cleacher region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Montfouille.
Okay, well, that's good to know. 2.3 million to support four Cleacher communities, and especially in Bichico, we have lots of houses that needs repair. I don't think there's 2.3 million, but I mean, you know, and divided by 4 communities, it's not enough. I don't think it's enough. So I just wanted to ask the minister if there's any plans in the future to increase the funding for housing repair program for public units. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's the quandary we are in as Housing N.W.T. is our federal funding is declining, and it's been declining since 1997 through the Social Housing Agreement. Presently, we're at about almost $10 million from the 97 Social Housing Agreement, but we did receive funds through a CMHC bilateral agreement in 2020, which supplemented our operating expenses for repairs and maintenance for public housing. But that agreement again ends in 2028. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on my list to speak I have is the member from the Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's unfortunate that we have homeless people in the N.W.T, let alone our small communities, and the homeless population is growing. We tend to see that some of our residents from the smaller communities are making their ways to making their way to the bigger centers, larger centers, because they have these homeless shelters readily available. So as they make their way to the bigger centers, the regional centers don't have the capacity to accommodate all the people that are looking for shelter, whether it be wintertime or summertime. They make their way. I know they make their way to Nuvik because we have some homeless people within our in our own communities. Is there a plan in the future to provide homeless shelters within the smaller communities in the future? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, there is no plan to expand homeless shelters into the smaller communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's pretty unfortunate because, like I stated, the homeless shelter in Nuvik only has capacity for so many people, and you see residents from other communities trying to go there, and they're told that they have no room, and the residents from the local town, like from the town of Inuvik, are given first priority because they're the ones that live in the community. Klavik has a program that's administered by the Klavik Indian Band. I think they have up to 4 units that assist these homeless people with accommodations. They're given some kind of program where they can live in a home and live there till they can find suitable long-term arrangements. I've spoken to some of the residents that occupy these units, and I've also spoken to some of the administrators who administer this program, and it seems to be working. And it'll be good if the department can look at providing these services in the other communities. I'm not going to ask you a question because I think you already answered my question about advocating or helping people, homeless people within the smaller communities. It's just unfortunate that I'm looking at your emergency shelters, and it's gone down significantly from 23-24 to 24-25. So I don't see any room for advancing these programs to other smaller communities. It's only going to get worse because the people that are homeless, they get in trouble with the housing, local housing authorities by getting into arrears, and if they move out of their place and in the future they want to apply, they're going to be told that they have arrears, and those arrears have to be cleared off before they're even considered. Then they're considered homeless. So it just would be good if the department can in the future look at this homelessness more carefully, because it's I lived in this in this environment for 5 months at one time, and you turn to alcohol. Myself, I just used alcohol, but I didn't consider myself an alcoholic because I was just merely surviving from one day to the next. And it's not, you can see that in every community. I see that in my own home community, and you feel helpless because you can't help your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your community members. And these people just need a little help because alcohol is the only deterrent they may have in the event that, just surviving. I didn't consider myself an alcoholic because I overcame it. I mean, I'm still battling, but I've been able to overcome it because I was surviving from one day to the next. And if the department can help these people by, keeping them in their own hometown where their residents can maybe give them assistance too by surviving from one day to the next. So it's more of a comment just to see if, in the future that the department can look at providing these kinds of services that's provided in Clavik and administered by a local Indigenous government. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I know that you mentioned that it was just a comment, but I'm going to go to the minister for an overall general comment to that. Thank you.
I know the difficulties in the past with housing N.W.T. in implementing policies that were colonialistic and sometimes punitive to many of our tenants across the Northwest Territories. But what we've done with housing N.W.T. over the last number of years is work on a strategic renewal initiative, which included looking at reassessing those with arrears and providing those that have been evicted to be placed back on the waiting list for housing. I know housing in the communities is few and far between. The 19th Assembly was the first assembly in many, many assemblies to actually put some capital dollars towards housing in the Northwest Territories. Much of that funding has been carried forward into this assembly, so we still got a bit of work to do. But with those policies that George's or MLA Nirsu, sorry George, is referring to is things that have been put in place in the past and that we're working on to change for the future, for a better future for all of us and for housing N.W.T. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from members? I'm going to go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am going back one page here, I apologize, but under community housing services, when we look at that line item for maintenance, and I think my colleague from Montfrey was drawing attention to this one too. My question is this budget, this line item, just for like minor maintenance or repairs, or would it be for more serious renovations that are needed to, to allow public housing units to be able to, be livable and stay open? I noticed that the description of it says that it's for funding for LHOs to undertake demand and preventative maintenance activities to support the provision of good quality housing. But does this include more substantive renovations or repairs? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Just thank you for that question. With the maintenance budget is for LHOs, and much of that is health and safety preventative maintenance measures that are done on each unit throughout the Northwest Territories, each public housing unit, but also paying for staff to maintain those units. So that's all encompassing in that number of $13,854,000. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going back to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if there was a need for a bigger renovation to keep a unit, livable, to keep it someone housed there, what line item or where would that come out of the budget?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For modernization and improvement of units, that is an MMI project, and that's under Community Housing Services, under expenditure category minor modernization and improvements. It comes through our capital plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do see a significant decrease in the budget for minor modernization and improvements, both on page 383 and then it's the exact same one on the wrap-up, page 379. So what's the reason for such a major decrease in the budget for the modernization and improvements? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. I'll move to the minister.
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, our CERNAC agreement sunsetted, and it decreased our MMI budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So was this budget being fully used? Was it fully subscribed before the sunsetting? Like, is there a need for at least, 6.6 or even $7.1 million worth of modernization improvements? That was the number from 2022-23. If we could find that money, could you use it? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member for the question. I mean, housing always could use more money, but we do have a carry-forward plan. MMI is part of that carry-forward plan, and we got a lot of work over the next year to catch up with that work. So our capital and our MMI budget is carry forward, and there's a lot of projects on the go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can the minister give any insights into why there is a lot of carry forward? It sounds like there's trouble implementing some of these projects and the needed, repairs and improvements. Can the minister give us some insights into what is holding us back from being able to use the money each year for the improvements that are needed? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that Housing and N.W.T is finding with much of our capital projects and our MMI projects is either cost, we put it out for tender and it just, the costs come back and they're way too high. Maybe because it's government, they think they can bid a higher rate. Sometimes we're having resupply issues, we're having capacity issues. There's many issues that we're having with Housing N.W.T, with our capital and MMI projects that have deterred us from completing those over the last couple of years. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do hope we have much more in-depth conversations, from here on in going forward as to how we can address some of these challenges and problems, because I think this gets at the crux of we are all so desperate to try and improve our housing stock and increase stock, and if we're having these bottlenecks or problems, I think we really need some detailed plans and sort of getting everyone on board to figure out how we can work together to address them. So I look forward to those continued conversations. One more question about apprentices. So are we able to use all of the money that we're setting out there for apprentices? So it looks like LHOs are hiring apprentices so we can increase the supply of qualified trades persons, which is exactly what we need. How is that program going? Is it fully subscribed? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The information from staff is the program is fully subscribed. It does change from year to year, depending if an apprentice would graduate from the program, but in partnership with EC&E, this program is fully subscribed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that's good news, and that's perhaps something we could identify going forward as if it's fully subscribed now and we increase our efforts, maybe we could even expand it and get more and more apprentices in there. That could be a positive step and a good news story. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll take that as a comment. Is there any further questions from members? I'm going to go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I was going to save my comments to go when we went back to the overall, but I want to follow up on my colleague's questions from Yellowknife North. And it's kind of alarming that we do have a $93 million surplus. And I know the member from Yellowknife North asked if there was a capacity issue getting this work completed. And I know, living in Inuvik, I know there is often, it's difficult in getting contractors to do work. I know a lot of the work that has to be done is work that's beyond the scope that our typical housing maintainers would do. But the fact remains that there's still 16 units in Inuvik that are still waiting for repairs to be done. And as the Minister knows, we have an extensive wait list in Inuvik for those units had they been repaired so people can get in them. And I guess my comment is, I mean, the fact is we know it's getting more expensive to build in the north. It's gotten more expensive in the past 5 years. We know during COVID it was very expensive, and we know that even post-COVID it's come down, but significant. So I guess my comment would be, I mean, is the department confident in the due diligence they're doing in budgeting and getting this, ensuring that when they're putting out tenders or RFPs to get these units either repaired or some of this major work done, that they're confident that they're keeping up with where costs are, particularly in the regions further north. Obviously, trucking with the carbon tax, with the cost of fuel, we know things are getting more expensive. So I just want to make sure that that the department is confident that they're doing whatever they can, because $93 million is an alarming number. I'm sure they appreciate the $2 to $3 million worth of interest they get on having that cash in the bank, but it certainly doesn't help the residents that are waiting on a wait list to get into these units. So just maybe a comment on that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Minister to the comment.
Chair. The member's comment, I understand that the work that Housing N.W.T has to do over the next year, especially in carrying out much of this capital and MMI projects, it's going to be a lot of hard work over the next year, especially with the timelines and the deliverables. But I'll ask President Eleanor Young to comment as well, and just to give some more information, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. I'll go to the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to clarify the $93 million, because there's more information in that than just the M&I conversation that we were starting with when we were talking about some of the challenges. That $93 million also includes projects that are in progress, because many of our new construction projects do take 2 years to complete by the time we ship, stage, and get the project installed. So it's quite normal for us to have a carryover related to projects that are in progress. The other big part that impacts the surplus this year is some of the federal funding that we received for 2 Yellowknife projects, the 50-unit build and the 36-unit renovation. Both of those projects, the money came in partway through the year, and so those projects, again, we received the money up front, but the projects are actually scheduled for completion by March of 25, I believe it is. So that money does sit to be able to finish those projects, but we did receive the full allocation up front from the federal government for those projects. So the $93 million surplus looks quite large, but in reality, it is cash flowing projects that we have underway throughout our capital plan. It isn't all because of delays in contracting and things of that nature. And also just, we do track cost of construction through a number of sources, and we test some of that with some of the local tendering just to make sure that our prices are falling in line with what the market is doing, and look for opportunities to reduce those costs wherever possible as well. So our staff are quite good at trying to make sure that our budgeting is realistic to what work we have to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does a member from Nunavut Lake have any further questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. And again, obviously, as I know the Minister knows, this does vary throughout the region. Certainly, as you get further north, the costs certainly go up and have continued to go up. What you mentioned that obviously a significant portion of the 93 million is major projects or projects in progress. Can the Minister tell me what portion of that 93 million is work that is currently in progress and over a 2-year or 3-year time span? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Let's give that to Jim. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim Martin here is going to provide some insight to that question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, currently within our capital delivery plan this year, we have a total of 150 units that are under construction at various stages of delivery. In terms of the multi-year, we have 65 of those units within the 150 that relate to the 100 Public Housing Expansion Initiative. That was a multi-year program that we set out during the 19th Legislative Assembly. And we're entering the final year here of delivery, so we expect all 65 of those units in the current plan to be completed this fiscal year. In fact, 14 of them are already completed, so we have 51 left to finalize this year. So that relates to the multi-year delivery. The public housing replacements within the plan, we have 25 units, and 4 of those were previously initiated in the previous year, but the 21 are currently new for delivery. And we also have, as Ms. Young outlined, within that 150, we also have 50 units associated with the 50 plex that's being constructed here in Yellowknife. And that is a multi-year project. It will be completed in the fall of 2025. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to a member from the Nunavut Lake.
Thank you for that. Can you provide a dollar value on that 93 million? I think is what I asked. How much of the 93 million that equates to in cash? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Jim to help me with the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Vice President.
Mr. Chair, so first off, the 65 units that was mentioned, part of the 100-unit delivery, there's $12 million left of that delivery, so they're nearing the final stages. In terms of the 50-unit build, which will be a multi-year, that number there, it's currently out for tender, and I can't provide that number at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try one more time. Can the Minister provide me with the amount that is not tied up in current projects?
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Jim to help me with this answer again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Vice President.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could the member please repeat the question? I just want to make sure I fully understand it.
Not tied to current projects.
Not tied.
Okay, I want to go back to the Vice President. I'm assuming you got the question for the Minister.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Not committed. Just looking here, about 60 million. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to go back to the member from the Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. Just to clarify, 60 million of the 93 is for projects that have yet to be started and hasn't been committed. Let me go back. Chair. I'll wait for the back to the summary and I'll ask it then. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the member from the Statute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My statement is more of a comment here, having seen a number of projects here out in the communities under construction, during construction, after construction. Is it part of the housing department to have a follow-up review, a completion review after the project is done, to see how it went? Was it on schedule? Was it done safely? Was it done within the budget? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Housing N.W.T. does that work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from the Statute.
Okay, no, thank you, and thanks to the Minister for that response. I think quality control is very critical to the completion of these schedules, and it may minimize the carryovers and the delays. I know this is a department that's facing a lot of challenges, like many other employers out in the communities, with the workforce difficulties. But there's always room for improvements, and I see this as one. And if the department's doing that, that's good. It shows that you're looking at the construction cost per square foot. That's good. And if it went on time in different areas, you're building a home in several different challenging regions. So, so I make that suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we'll go to the member from the DHO.
Thank you. My question to the minister is the 150 units, how many of those units are those new builds, public housing units or market housing, and how many of them are going into the DHO riding, if they haven't already done so? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Martin will provide the information related to the DHO riding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the vice president.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of the units noted, we have a total of 4. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the member from the DHO.
4 units, are those single dwellings or duplexes or fourplexes? What are they? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are single units, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the DHO.
Are those the ones that are currently in Fort Providence, or are they somewhere else? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those units are located in Fort Providence, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the DHO.
What I saw in Fort Providence was 2 4-bedroom, 4 single units in one building. I saw 2 of them. So is that correct? Like you said, there's 4 of those, or is there just 2? Because I only saw 2, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to the minister.
There's actually 6. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the good news is there's 6 units in Fort Providence, and those are the units that you did see. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the DHO.
You got 4, and then a couple of seconds later you jumped to 6.
Yeah, thank you. I had 4, now I have 6. I'm very happy. Thank you. And how many do we have How many more do we have coming for the debt to writing? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Capital upgrade for 24-25. There's only 2 duplexes. Hay River Reserve.
Yeah.
Hay River Reserve. Oh, do I count those?
Yeah. The only units in this capital plan are Hay River Reserve. That's it. MMI. Oh, yes.
So there's 2 duplexes.
So 2 duplexes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm the numbers, and we have 2 duplexes to the Hay River Reserve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the DHO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. I have no more questions. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, I'm going to continue on. Seeing no further questions, we will not be voting on this activity total. Moving on to the home ownership system program, starting on page 388. Are there any questions? I'm going to go to the member from, Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a quick one. I note on the budget that between 23, 24, and 25, Habitat for Humanity's contribution ended. I can probably answer that question for myself, that it's that the CMHC National Co-Investment Fund concluded, but I guess the question that I do want to bring to the department is there planned funding in the future for Habitat for Humanity? What's the department doing in terms of working with this organization for their next set of builds?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. President Young will provide that information.
Thank you. I'll go to President Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The remaining Habitat units that are under their current agreement with CMHC, of which there's 3 more still to be constructed, Housing has arranged to pay for our cost share component out of some cost share money we had in the last government. So we have got our money set aside for the remainder of the Habitat units that are committed to currently. And as the member mentions, Habitat is currently working with Canada to look for an extension to that agreement past 2028, and we'll support them if they're able to do so at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you. I'll go back to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it for me on this page.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? I'll go to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your category here of seniors aging in place, the other day I made a statement, a member's statement in regards to having seniors' homes inspected annually. Your seniors aging in place, it has gone down a little bit, but can this be used to inspect seniors' homeowners' home to find if there's any minor repairs before it becomes too costly for them? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll move to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. President Young will provide information on the inspections of housing units. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the president.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with this budget, there would be an inspection done on the home as part of the application to determine what repairs would be done to the home. So the inspection would be part of the application process. For folks who just need an inspection without submitting an application, we could work with the LHO to see if that could be done, but it wouldn't be out of this specific program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was looking at that and I was, feeling kind of optimistic about the elders that want to stay within the community, and this would help them a great deal with inspections, because I am getting calls from mainly the community of Tsigechek. The the resident that I contacted him, and he said it'll be good if they can have annual inspections on their home, because at their age they can't determine if there's any deficiencies in their own home, except if their heating source goes out, then they may get worried. But if an annual inspection can be conducted, I had something here. More of a preventative measure. Like if a senior wants an inspection on his home, how would he or she go about proceeding with an inspection? Would they go to the local housing authority and ask for an application, help with an application? Every elder requires assistance filling out applications because they're so time consuming and everything, got to make things more easier for our elders, because they want to stay within their own communities where they feel comfortable. So just how would they go about getting this information so they can get their homes inspected, especially if it's this time of the year, they can get some work done on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Mr. Chair, I would encourage the elders, if they're interested in inspections of their homes, that they contact the local housing authority, and the local housing authority could work with program staff at the district office. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My other concern is the home purchase program. I know the Indigenous governments within each region were allocated some money from the federal government to build houses within their respective regions, and I believe within my community of Fort McPherson, I believe we have eight houses constructed by the Gwich'in Tribal Council, and I think the purpose of building these houses is not to turn over to housing for public housing use, but to give residents of communities the option or the opportunity to own their own homes, because right now we have a number of young people that are working, they have families, and they have no choice but to live with their parents, because they're not eligible to live in public housing units because of how much money they make. So if these houses were, which I believe are going to be given or not given, or letting these potential homeowners, if they can get a mortgage to own these homes, with the home purchase program, be something that they can look at applying for, to give them assistance, because most of these people are single mothers, and it's going to be pretty difficult for them to start. But if this program can help them, it'll be of great value. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If President Young can talk a bit more about the home purchase program to provide information to MLA Nyersu. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I'll start by saying the homes that the Indigenous governments are building, those are separate from Housing N.W.T, and so I can't say for sure how they plan to deliver their home ownership program. But the home purchase program that Housing N.W.T offers is a down payment assistance program. It's primarily targeted to regional centers, but we can look at it if this is required in other communities. But I think first we would need to have a conversation just with the Indigenous government to understand how they're planning to deliver the program and whether our programs would match up or not. We do have the collaborative agreement with the Indigenous government in your riding, so we can absolutely have a conversation just to understand how we can work together to support the homeowners. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from the Mackenzie Delta.
It will be beneficial, thank you, Mr. Chair, it will be beneficial to the potential homeowners. And there is, I would like to hear back what the purpose of those homes are for. But it would help a great deal in getting some potential homeowners within my community, because they'd like to be independent and strive for something that they've always wanted, and owning a home is a big step. So having this forgivable loan, if it's available, to subsidize the cost, it will help a great bit. It's just more of a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on my list I have is from the member from the Decho.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my question to the Minister of Housing is on the emergency repair program. Can members from my riding, my constituents from the Hay River Reserve access this program? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Minister.
Chair, yes, the members can access this program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Decho.
Question is, thank you to the Minister. Can members that are, I don't know if the housing that they're living in currently, some of the members from the Hay River Reserve, if they're housing units, if they're privately owned units, can they still access the program?
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is what the program would be eligible for, is for privately owned units, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Decho.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And can residents or my constituents, are they to go to the local district office, or which office do they go to access, to get an application to take part in this emergency repair program? Because currently I'm told by some residents that they are not able to access any emergency repair program. There's a few of my constituents in Hay River on the reserve that are having issues with the damages from the flood and having mold underneath their houses, and currently are getting no support at all. And it was really unfortunate. So now I can tell them they can access this emergency repair program, which is delivered out of which office in Hay River. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The program's delivered out of the Hay River District Office. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Decho.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I will advise my constituents to go to this district office and apply for emergency repair programs. Hopefully thank you. That's a question I have. Hopefully they're eligible to receive that funding for the repairs, as we're now in June, fall's going to come, and I would really like for them to have that support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to, any other members that have questions? I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Thank you. This fuel tank replacement for homeowners, I know that's a popular program because a lot of people in my region applied and got their fuel tank replaced and etc. So for this fiscal year, I see the program is I don't know if it's discontinued, but there's no money allocated. So if the minister can explain why this fiscal year, because people are going to be asking.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fuel tank replacement program for homeowners is discontinued for this fiscal year. We encourage all homeowners interested in replacing their fuel tank to use the emergency repair program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Yes, thank you for that information. It's good to know, so we can redirect them to that program. Another one too is that here, so all these housing programs, it's a good programs because I know a lot of we've been advocating for a lot of people and to apply for these programs. So I just want to ask, all these programs that's in place, are they based on income threshold? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, all the programs are based on the core need income threshold, and it depends on which region they live in for the different types of income threshold. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Thank you. Well, it's in my region and it's in her region, in all the north, because especially for seniors and elders aging in place, it's difficult for them to make ends meet. So they, like they do part-time job here and there or contract work. And when the income tax season comes, a lot of times, some of them, they're denied the program. So I just wanted to ask the minister if they can increase the income threshold to accommodate elders, retirees, so they can apply for these programs, be eligible for the programs. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Mr. Chair, this is some of the work that we're doing over the next little while is review of the core need income threshold and also the rental scale. These, both the rental scale and the core need income threshold haven't been reviewed since 2012, so we're doing some of the work behind that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Thank you. That's all I have for this on this page. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I'm going to go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's been some sort of concern circulating amongst constituents that programs for home ownership assistance are being cut, or they won't have opportunities to get help in purchasing homes. Now, I do see that the home purchase program is being maintained. If we go back to page 383, we certainly see a bit of a decrease in the home ownership entry level program. Can the minister explain, so that it's clear to everyone in the public too, are some of the home ownership assistance programs being cut, and is there a shift towards a different type of assistance towards home ownership? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fuel tank replacement program for homeowners is the only one that has been discontinued for this fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And the home ownership entry level program, is that a type of home ownership assistance program, and is that one being cut? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister to the question.
The home ownership entry level and market housing program was a program that was introduced in 2007. It was 300 housing units across the Northwest Territories. The Housing N.W.T would work with clients to offer a 2 to 3 year program with the HELP program. So they would take on that unit after 2 to 3 years. This has continued to 2024, so we're like almost 20 years still running a program that was supposed to be discontinued in 2009, 2010. So what we're doing with Housing N.W.T is we're going to look at the remaining clients. I think we have about 50 remaining clients, and counsel them to take on the unit as part of their home, to buy it as their home through a forgivable loan program. And the other units that have been vacated or given back to Housing N.W.T will either become public units or market homes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's more clear, I think. If we go down to the preventative maintenance program, and so it looks like the budget is being decreased from where it was last year. It's still a little bit above the 2022-23, but it also seems like it would be super valuable to the description of the program is assisting households to complete preventative maintenance, making minor servicing or repairs, which seems like exactly the type of thing that we need to be doing more of, so we don't end up with more costs and renovations and new homes always having to be built. Can you explain why it's being decreased from last year's funding levels? Was it fully subscribed? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To the Minister.
Chair, Vice President Martin will answer this question, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I'll go to the Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was an internal budget adjustment made for 24-25. There was a reallocation of funds from the preventive maintenance program to the Community Housing Support Initiative program. We wanted to increase the Community Housing Services program while at the same time maintaining a sufficient level of program budget to accommodate current client need. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
So the proposed budget amount for preventative maintenance program for this year, 2024-25, at $932,000, is that going to be sufficient to meet all of the needs or the applications that you would have coming in based on, say, last year's level of applications? Or will there be people who get turned away with that amount of funding in that pot? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The number proposed is based on actuals from last fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Okay, that's good to know. So my last question is, if for some reason we do have, a lot more people coming forward this year wanting to do preventative maintenance, it seems like something we would really, really want to support. Would there be ways to shuffle around money from other pots, such as the emergency repair program or something, to be able to accommodate people wanting to do preventative maintenance? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Housing N.W.T would look for that internally. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mike, I'm going to hand it from the debt show for one additional question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was so excited I forgot to ask one more question. So I have this other question. I was so happy residents might be able to access a program to assist them with their living conditions. The criteria, I wanted to know what is the criteria for the emergency repair program? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. President Young is looking for the information at this moment, but when we look at applications for emergency repair or home ownership, we do have a number of things that clients would have to be eligible for, including our core income threshold, so they have to be within that threshold to be applicable. They also have to have title to the home, and President Young can provide more information to this question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the president.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to what the minister said, this program is intended for urgent health and safety repairs, is really what it's targeted to. It's a maximum of $15,000, and it's forgivable within the year, so clients can apply in successive years if they require that kind of emergency assistance. And yeah, as the minister said, income tested, and I think that's the key pieces of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we want to continue on now. Seeing no further questions, we will not be voting on this activity total. Moving on to housing operation support, starting on page 390. Are there 390 other questions? Yes, I want to go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So earlier, in an earlier section, the minister clarified that the housing needs assessment and the housing infrastructure deficit assessment, as mentioned in Housing N.W.T's business plan, will be moving more expeditiously. That's great news. My question is more centered on the business plan in general, and I'm bringing it up here because usually that's a joint production of the folks who are housed in housing support operations and support. My question is, there are many actions in the Housing N.W.T business plan that do not have targets, and I'm just wondering if the minister will be updating and sharing that plan now that there are some changed pieces in it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we'll be updating the business plan with targets. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's fantastic. And will the minister be sharing that information publicly? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that material will be available publicly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's good for me. Thank you.
Any further questions from members? Seeing no further questions, we will not be voting on this activity. Moving on to non-residential buildings and operations, starting on page 392. Are there any questions? I'm going to go to the member from Monfrey.
Regarding the housing operations and support. Okay. So I want to ask the minister that, and she is well aware of it too, because, you know, TUC is in the same situation as we are in Cleacher region, especially in Bichico. You know, with the housing crisis, we have a wait list of over 200 applicants on, you know, in Bichico alone. So, and I don't think the wait list decreased, but it increased. It went up because there's more family coming back, that are moving back to the communities, and it's having an effect, you know. on the families that, taking in the family members that just moved back to the community. So I just wanted to ask the minister if they have a plan in place to eliminate the wait list especially in my region, in Clutha region. Is there a plan in place, or I know that we need more houses. I hope that she will say we need to build more houses, in Clutha region to eliminate the wait list. I know Yellowknife is in the same situation too, but I'm advocating for my region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the wait list, the housing wait list, is something that is quite surprising considering the need across the Northwest Territories. And like the MLA mentioned, especially in regions like the Clutha region, I look at numbers: Fort Smith, Hay River, Inuvik, my community of Tuck, Yellowknife. The wait list is long. Some of the work that we've done and that we're continuing from the 19th Assembly is addressing some of that wait list. And then we're also looking at working with Department of Education, Culture and Employment, especially around income support clients, to determine the viability of the wait list with the clients, as there's stipulations within the policy that they apply for housing. So is that need in terms of wait list 900 families on the wait list, or is it something that's much smaller? But again, we have to do the work through the housing needs assessment to determine that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Monfrey.
Thank you for the information. Yeah, so that's all I have for this speech.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for page 392? Seeing none, we will not be voting on this activity total. Moving on to the rent subsidy program, starting at page 394. Are there any questions? Seeing no further questions, we will not be voting on this activity total. Moving on to unilateral CMHC and other programs, starting on page 396 with information items on page 398. Are there any questions? Seeing no further questions, we will not be voting on this activity total. Committee, there are additional information item on page 399. Are there any questions? Thank you, committee. Please return to the Housing Northwest Territory summary on page 379. Are there any further questions or comments from the committee? I'm going to go to the member from Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a general comment and maybe a question for clarity. I know initially when certainly the Indigenous government in my region and likely others received the Federal Housing Initiative funding, there was a fair amount of work done in cooperation with N.W.T. housing. Units were built on N.W.T. housing land, I believe, and then transferred for a nominal fee to allow the N.W.T. housing to add that to their inventory, list of inventory of public housing. So going forward, and I know now, and I mean we've said it in this House that in my region, certainly, the Nunavut, I think it just purchased 22 lots in my region. I know the Gwich'in Tribal Council are purchasing lots as well and building their own homes, and have set up, some for market rentals, some for other programs that they are involved in. So I guess I'd like to hear from the minister. Did we miss the opportunity, I guess, to continue to work with the Indigenous governments in our region? I noticed that work is now they've went on their own with their funding. And so a couple of questions. Did we miss that opportunity? The previous government obviously missed that opportunity. And how is the relationship now, and kind of what are our plans going forward to work together on some potential, whether it be senior facilities or other facilities that are required in the region, that there may be some redundancies there that we can work together and certainly look at pooling some resources to get that infrastructure built. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the MLA's question, and the work that we do in collaboration with Indigenous governments is critical, especially in advancing our mandate and business plan. In terms of missing opportunities, I think at this point, Indigenous governments, with their distinction-based funding that they're getting from the federal government, see that as an opportunity for market houses in their communities, and they're advancing that. They're advancing their own plans. So that's fine with Housing N.W.T. if they want to do that. The thing is that nobody is interested in public or social housing builds. That's going to be the government Northwest Territories' responsibility. They're going to stick with market homes from what I understand. We will continue with public and social housing rentals, and that's the job that we have to do. But what I can do is ask President Young here to provide more information to the question from MLA Rogers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in addition to what the Minister said, there are still some partnership projects in the works. We do have, for example, in the Beaufort riding, a joint plan to do an elders unit where some of the units will be administered through potentially health programming and some will be public housing. That's a conversation that's still underway, but we're active in it. We understand that one of the Indigenous governments is hiring 2 housing staff to work more closely with us because they've been understaffed the last couple of years in the housing area. So we'll be able to have a team to work with. We have a new collaborative agreement with the other Indigenous government in your area that we're quite excited about working with. And we're taking all sorts of tacks. We're looking at any land that we may not need that we can make available to the Indigenous government. We'll work with Environment, Climate Change, and Municipal and Community Affairs to work on the land needs in addition to what we may be able to support. Looking at supporting the development of housing plans. So although it may not be out in the public as much as it has been previously, there is still a lot of work ongoing, and whether it's through formal partnership agreements or just ongoing working group conversations, the activity is still ongoing and work with each other. I think the distinctions-based funding has just given them other work to do, so some of these partnership projects are not as high on the radar and the public view as they maybe were before. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam President, for that information, and Minister Kaptana. I'm very happy to hear that the Elders Unit is still in discussion, and that we are still, and the fact that you're looking at working with other departments to make that land available, very important, particularly in the smaller communities on the coast. I know that in the Minister's riding. So very encouraging to hear that. I would encourage you to sing that from the rooftops, Minister. I think it's a good news story that we need to get out there to let them know that N.W.T. housing is not now an afterthought for Indigenous governments, that they are indeed still working with them, appreciating that, yes, they are doing some of their own initiatives, but I don't think everything they're doing is market rent, so to make sure we're involved in that. So, no, important to get that out there, and I appreciate the answer, and no question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from members? I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wanted to dig in a little bit more into a line of questioning that the member for Nunavut Lake was getting into. So the first question I wanted to ask is, it sounds like there's a fair number of builds planned for the coming year, and yet infrastructure investment is listed as $13 million. So can the minister or staff kind of help me understand what money is actually going out the door? Maybe it is just $13 million, but I thought I heard $33 million is going out the door. We've got $60 million sitting there. So if I could just kind of get a better understanding of how the capital money is budgeted for in this budget, and where the other money ends up landing, on this page, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like I mentioned, we do have a $93 million carry forward plan in capital, which includes new builds and MMI projects. We also have the $13 million outlined in the 2024-25 main estimates. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I get a bit more detail on kind of what's planned for the builds for this year? Is the minister able to share any details with us on what exactly they're planning to do with the money?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Vice President Martin can help me with that answer to be more explicit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as noted previously, this is an updated number for this fiscal. So we have $107 million planned for investment this fiscal year. That's comprised of the following: 283 units for modernization and improvement, repair projects. We have 65 that we're currently completing, new public housing units. We have transitional housing projects that are underway, and that's going to be 10 beds. We have biomass projects on the books right now that will support, in the plan, 99 units, public housing units, to be supported with biomass solutions. We have just recently completed in the plan a fourplex market housing fourplex in Toledo. We're also in the plan with 75 public housing replacement projects. And that covers the majority of the plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. I'll go to the member from Frame Lake.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and please forgive me. I'm kind of writing down all these numbers, and it's all looking like quite a bit of. This is actually quite a bit of activity. Can the minister's staff just clarify all of this that was just listed is occurring in 24-25?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's an impressive amount of work, I must say. I don't know. I'm kind of left sitting here thinking like, wow, we should be telling people about this. This is really exciting stuff. Maybe you are, and maybe it's just been falling on deaf ears. I'm not sure. But
the finance minister's giving you eyes.
So help me understand then. So we're spending 107 million. Where does this 60 million of uncommitted funding come into that number?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
It's primarily made.
The number that the MLA is referring to is primarily made up of the number for the 50-unit build in Yellowknife and public housing replacement for 24-25.
To be tendered.
To be tendered, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that clarification. So while the funding may not be tendered, when we say uncommitted, there are projects slated for that funding. So that funding is, the 60 million is part of this list of builds that you listed out for me. I'm not going to go through them all again, but it's part of that to occur in 24-25.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from Frame Lake.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last but not least, I would appreciate it. It would be much easier for me to keep track of all this if the department was able to give us kind of a 1 or 2 sheet kind of just summary of this, all the information she just provided me, just so I can have it on hand, if that's okay, in writing.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we can provide that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we're having a good day. Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's going to be it for me for questions on this page. It was a lot of information. Thank you to the Minister and her staff for getting that to me.
Thank you. Any further questions from members for page 379? We'll go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I won't be long. I just need a little clarity because it seems like there was a little bit of a contradiction in the answer. When I asked the question, out of the 93 million surplus, how much was not committed, the answer I got was 60 million was yet to be committed. So did the minister mean yet to be tendered or yet to be committed?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister to the question.
Mr. Chair, yes, yet to be tendered, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Okay, thank you. So the entire 60 million has projects attached to it, buildings attached to it for 24-25, and then the remainder of the 93 is carryover from ongoing projects that started last year or previous year. Is that correct?
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you. Sorry if I seem confused. I just want to make sure I have the proper information. So, and of the 60 million that is earmarked for projects that is yet to be tendered, those projects were all projects that were scheduled for 24-25, or are those projects that carried over from previous years and or projects that will move into next fiscal year?
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, a majority of the projects were carried forward, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Okay, so the majority of the 60 million is projects that weren't done last year. Sorry. For various and sundry reasons that we discussed earlier about capacity and contractors and so on and so forth. Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? Seeing no further questions, does the committee agree that the consideration of housing Northwest Territories is now complete? Member for the Nunavut Lake.
What's that, sorry? Deferred. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't have my earpiece on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that this committee defer consideration of the main estimates for housing Northwest Territories at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The motion is in order. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. Consideration of housing Northwest Territories operation expenditure 2024-2025. Main estimates total department is deferred. Thank you, Minister, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing before us. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witness from the chambers. Thank you. What is the wish of committee? Member for Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move the chair will rise and report progress. Thank you.
The motion is in order. The motion is not debatable. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion is carried. I will now rise and report progress. Thank you.
Member from Untitled.
Mr. Speaker, your committee has been considering table documents 93-20 brackets 1 and would like to report progress number 2, motions carried. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the committee of the whole be concurred with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Can I have a seconder, please? Member from N.W.T. To the question, or to the motion? Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed. Reports on Committee of the Whole, reports on Committee of the Whole, third reading of bills, Orders of the day, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Orders of the day for Wednesday, June 12, 1:30 p.m. Prayer, minister statements, member statements, returns to oral questions, recognition of visitors in the gallery, acknowledgements, oral questions, written questions, returns to written questions, replies to the Commissioner's address. Petitions, reports of committees on the review of bills, reports of standing and special committees, tabling of documents, notices of motion, motions, motion 34-20 bracket 1, 35-20 bracket 1, notice of motion for first reading of bills, second reading of bills, Bill 7, Bill 8, consideration in Committee of the Whole of bills and other matters, table documents 93 and 111, report of Committee of the Whole, third reading of bills, orders of the day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Clerk, this House stands adjourned until Wednesday, June 12, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Order!